You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, I'm very excited to bring this guest to you. He has an incredibly impressive background and, as many of us, a little bit of a circuitous journey to get to where he is today, but I'm going to let him explain all that to us. His name is Michael Reddington. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Doug. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I kind of teased that circuitous journey. Give us a summary of your backstory. What was your journey like to get you into the work you're doing now?
I appreciate you asking, and you nailed it with circuitous. You could add unintentional, accidental, fortuitous, the list goes on and on. But in summary, I don't want to bore everybody right out of the gate, but I started out as a special education teacher and baseball coach at the middle school level. Thought that's all I would ever do. Ended up transitioning over to the financial services industry, which I know some people make a wonderful career out of. I lasted 2 years, 1 month, and 2 days, which was probably 2 years, 1 month, and 1 day longer than I ever should have been there to begin with. Went back to business school, figure out what I was going to do next, was juggling part-time jobs, and one of them just happened to be in the security industry. One thing led to another. I ended up getting promoted to a management role. And in that role, one of my responsibilities was to have conversations with people who made regrettable decisions and to encourage them to tell me the truth about it and write it down. And I ended up having the opportunity to have many of those conversations in a pretty short span of time, which then led to a more formal education in non-confrontational interview and interrogation techniques. And that, for me, that sparked the curiosity, the passion, the hunger to learn more, not necessarily about getting people to confess, but for me, I was fascinated with why people will tell the truth under these circumstances, like what's going on inside their brain that leads them to make this decision. So as my career continued to grow in the investigative realm, and I was up in the Northeast, so from New Hampshire to Massachusetts to Connecticut to New York and New Jersey, I earned my certified forensic interviewer designation. After that, I was recruited by a company called Wicklander Zalosky and Associates. They're out of suburban Chicago. They're the world leader in non-confrontational interview and interrogation training and advising. I was with them for 10 years. I ran their investigations division. I conducted many contract interrogations. I traveled the world teaching non-confrontational interview and interrogation techniques to law enforcement, federal agents, private sector investigators, HR professionals, that's how I met my wife, and more. And at that phase of my career, I guess towards really the back half of that, especially when I was out working with private sector organizations, often the CEOs or senior leaders would kind of pop in, what's this guy really teaching to my people? And then after a little while, they'd say, hey, can I buy you a beer? Or can I take you out to dinner? I've got this question. And now we're workshopping difficult negotiations, customer issues, vendor issues, coaching issues, performance management conversations. And it dawned on me that these leaders are really solving the same communication problems in their world that I was in mine. So with that, and I still have a wonderful relationship with WZ. I love those guys. I love that company. But I transitioned out, started in Quasive, wrote the disciplined listening method, and now I spend them in heaven for years, spending the majority of my time teaching leaders, sales professionals, HR professionals, parents, and more, really what it takes to connect with people at a level which will encourage them to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences, really that's a confession, but we do it every day, all day without realizing it.
Yeah. I love that. And so you summed it up well there. And in respect to leadership duties and responsibilities, often the biggest challenge is you've got to assemble the people around you, either one-on-one or as a small group, small team. And what you really want to know is, guys, tell me the truth. What's going on here? And depending on your leadership style, that can either be a very confrontational, threatening, high-risk environment for the employee, or it can be maybe so passive, nobody really believes that you really want to know or you really care, and there's everything in between. So that ability to really frame the discussion in a way, and pardon me, correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology here, but I'm saying frame the conversation in a way that will open the door to the truth.
I think you nailed it. Frame the conversation, open the door to the truth. You're 100% right. When we think about it from a leadership perspective, to quote my son, that's not fair. There's lots of unfair things involved when it comes to trying to get the truth. Number one, our titles as leaders alone makes people less motivated to be honest with us, because we are the ones who can deliver consequences. So right out of the gate, we need it, but just our title, whatever it is, CEO, founder, VP, manager, director, doesn't matter. That's going to motivate people to be more cautious with what they share with us. Then factor in a lot of the people that work for us now have worked for other people previously that didn't react the way they were hoping when they told them the truth. So in a lot of ways, the people we speak with have been Mirandized. They know that anything they say will be used against them at their leader's first opportunity. So they're more motivated to withhold the truth than they are to share it. And often when you look at it from the leader's perspective, unfortunately, if we were to categorize people by like business roles or terms, senior leaders and technical experts have the hardest time listening. And a lot of senior leaders are technical experts, so they're in double trouble. But it's their expertise, it's their experience, it's their education, it's the problems that they're forced to solve that actually demotivates us to listen to others. So now we have all of these competing interests in a conversation. So we need to earn the right for people to want to tell us the truth. And so how we frame it, how we approach it, how we help people save face, how we ask questions in a way that focuses on the issue, not the person, and the resolution, not the consequence. All of these things can make a real big difference to motivate people to commit to being honest, or encourage them to take the path that most people have been operationally conditioned to, which is I'm going to be real cautious with what I tell you, to leave as many alternatives on the table for me moving forward to try to keep my butt out of trouble.
Yeah. Man, you packed a lot in there, and let me start with one of the things you said made me think about something I talk to people a whole lot about, my clients, that is, you know, most managers, 99 probably 0.9, I just made up that statistic, but it's high, their journey into management came as a sole contributor. They started out being a technician, being that expert subject matter type, delivering on a good or service or a piece of technology expertise. And they get recognized as the sharpest guy on the team, guy or gal on the team, and then poof, they're made the team leader. And what I talk about is there's this psychology, I believe, that goes on that they think to themselves, even consciously or subconsciously, well, I got recognized because of my contribution. I need to double down on contribution if I'm going to be successful. And that may work in that first position as team leader, but then when they say, well, we want to make you an associate director of a group, which maybe is 2 or 3 teams, when you think double down on execution, you start missing the real opportunity, and that is shifting into the legitimate, bona fide people leadership realm. Kind of step away from that transactional delivery and get more into motivating, inspiring, directing, leading the team. And that's a shift most people don't understand. They don't try it, even if they want to. The companies suffer through that. And then after another couple of promotions, the company may finally say, you know what, we ought to send this guy to some training. We ought to get him a coach. Maybe he could be a better leader if we give him. But you've already had 2 or 3 titles, and who knows how many people you've impacted negatively along the way to get you where you are now.
All great points. And we can even build on that. You're right. Most people, as they grow up in their career, do a job really well. And then as a result of that job, okay, now go lead other people doing a similar job. And under stress, we go to what we know. So now I'm in a management role. I'm good at doing the thing. So if I'm under stress, well, just give it to me. I'll do it, or do it the way that I did it, or do it the way that I got recognized. Because if you fail at it, that's a reflection on me, and my self-image can't handle that. So now the fear sets in, the lack of skill development, all of those things. And perhaps the best way to help anyone, including ourselves, develop is by failure and making mistakes. So giving people the latitude to try it, to learn it, to mess it up, to coach them through it is something that often it's not that we don't have the capacity to do it. We haven't been taught how to do it. We haven't been explained the importance of it. The people who put us in our role didn't necessarily give us a face-saving out or insulating conversation to be like, hey, your people are probably going to screw some things up. That's what they're there for. That's what you're here for. We're going to coach them through. We're going to help them through that. So it's all very valid points. And it's hard to transition from doer to delegator or doer to teacher and into transition into that person development role. And so the more people, this probably said a lot of different ways, and people, I'm sure, say it's similar to this. But for me, I feel like maybe this is common sense, maybe it's not. Like, leader should be synonymous with teacher. And so as I move up, and teacher should be really synonymous with learner, because if I'm going to teach, I need to continue to learn. So now, how as I grow, and the question should be, I guess rhetorically for us, is as I grow in my career, how do I help other people learn? And if I can focus on helping other people learn, then I'll learn along the way. We can all develop and we can all get better at this. But to your point, especially early in somebody's management career, that's not explicitly taught. So we got to kind of figure it out on our own.
Right, right. So let's get back to the core subject here, this idea of framing a conversation that can lead to the ultimate truth. Let's start with the dark side. What are some other detractors from the ability to do that?
So we could probably spend over an hour just on those alone, but to hit a few highlights. Oftentimes when we go into a conversation really focused on what we want to know, not what the other person needs to experience, which might not sound like they're two different things, but they're really different things. So if I was to walk up to you and say, Doug, where are we on this project? Or Doug, let's do it this way. Doug, are we going to make the deadline? Well, the implied expected answer is yes. That's the only acceptable thing for you to say, so you're going to say it. And if I'm in the mentality of that's all I want to hear, then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to accept it as face value. And then the day before the deadline, when we realize we're not going to hit it, I'm going to be mad at you, when in reality, my approach actually forced you to give me an answer that wasn't necessarily true. That's not your fault. It's mine. So, and we've got an alternative for that in just a second. But if we look at it from the questioner's perspective, the leader's perspective, if questions can be perceived as invitations or attacks. So from the timing, from the delivery, from the audience, who else is around, the focus of the question, is the question focused on the person, or is it focused on the issue? Is it focused on the consequence? Is it focused on achieving the goal? All of these things can contribute. And then from the perspective of the person who's receiving the question, if there's implied expected answers, well, I'm going to give you the right answer. This question is a test. My job is to pass the test. So I'm going to give you the answer that I think will help me pass the test. I need to protect my self-image. So how do I answer this in a way that limits me from consequences? The biggest one could just be embarrassment, let alone getting, terminated or anything like that. So really, as a leader, if we want to get the truth from somebody, as cheesy as this might sound, we're in the experience cultivation business. How do I frame the conversation and create an experience where you're willing to let your guard down and tell me the truth? And one of the best ways to do it, to use your words, is to frame the question or conversation around a universally agreed upon premise or outcome, so it feels like we're focusing in the same direction. So I'll do a quick example and then I'll shut up. But even from like that deadline, instead of saying, are we going to make the deadline, for which there's only one acceptable answer, now I might sit down and say, hey, Doug, we've already jumped through enough hoops trying to help this customer. The unfortunate reality is, as soon as we sign that contract, they get to change the rules of the game, but we don't get to change the deadline. So considering everything we've already done to accommodate them, I'm curious, what would maybe be the top 3 obstacles left that could jeopardize our ability to make the deadline? You're going to get an honest answer to that question nearly 100% of the time, because now it's framed around the customer, the deadline, and the obstacles. It's not framed around you and your ability to get it done.
Well, and as you were describing that, I'm putting my executive hat on in situations I've had in live fire. When you frame it that way, that also kind of flips the script on the consequence. It gives the employee the opportunity to say, Well, these three things could be roadblocks to us making that deadline. Now I'm free. I stated the problem. It's not me, it's these things. And now I'm free to, I have amnesty.
You are 100% correct. And when we think about getting the truth, I feel like as a society and leaders too, our version, the truth we want is the law and order version of the truth. Like I want full accountability. I want full truth. I want an apology. I want all of it right now. It's the amount of mental hoops we have to jump through to get that makes it supremely difficult. But if we think about getting the truth in stages, and that can be within one conversation, but if we think about getting the truth in stages, we have a much greater likelihood of capturing it all. And to your point about amnesty, often excuses are the express way to the truth. And when we say that to executive groups, you watch their eyeballs roll and their stomach turns and people get sick in the back of their mouth. Like we're not absolving people of accountability. We're using their excuses to get to accountability. So to your point, they don't have to say, I've made these mistakes. I didn't prioritize. I didn't manage my time. I forgot to do this thing. Now we're behind. They can say, these are the obstacles that are left. Boom. Now the problem is on the table. We can solve it. We can't solve it till it's on the table. So helping them save face to put the problem on the table then lets us solve us together and work our way back to accountability in a way that it will take hold, as opposed to forcing it on somebody in the first 5 seconds of a conversation.
Yeah. The other thing I thought about as you were describing all of this is there's a popular buzzword going around in leadership speak, psychological safety.
Yeah.
And, the leader creating psychological safety. And I think I'm going to interject that I think in its truest form, what you're talking about is an example of the leader building a safety net of that psychological ability to speak the truth, or at least get closer to speaking the truth, even though it might be incremental as you go. But having that, and I often point to the infamous Google study called Project Aristotle, where they asked the question, why do some of our teams perform so much better than others? And after a 2-year study, in classic Google form, they came away with that discussion. First and foremost was this notion of psychological safety on the team. People could state their position or their opinion or their idea without fear of retribution, retaliation, consequence. It was fair game. It was genuinely fair game to speak, and that made people kick into their discretionary effort zone. Every human being, whatever task you're doing, you've got a bare minimum execution, and then you've got a discretionary range. You've got some extra capacity there. It's that extra mile, that fifth gear kind of thinking. And you can choose to tap into that resource voluntarily. No manager can force you to go to that zone, but they can inspire you and influence you to go there. And that's the big difference between leaders who get more out of their teams than others.
I love that phrase, discretionary effort zone. I love that. I'm going to try to remember to write that down when we're done. I'll attribute it to you. That I love that phrase. And you're 100% right. People are going to choose. There's a huge difference between commitment and compliance, outside of like safety compliance and legal compliance. And I feel like often when leaders hear somebody say, fine, I'll do it. Like, yes, I won. No, you didn't. You're losing. Because when they say, fine, I'll do it, that's coerced compliance. They're going to go give you the minimum amount of effort for the minimum amount of time, backed up by maximum resentment based on how they got there. So it's not a win. Commitment happens when they can line their self-image up with what you're asking them to do. So to use your awesome phrase, they'll dip into that discretionary effort zone, put more effort in, be more committed for a longer period throughout whatever series of challenges might arise. And I feel like as leaders, maybe this is uncommon common sense, People are going to be more motivated not to tell you the truth. People are going to be more motivated to protect themselves, protect their livelihood, protect their ability to take care of their family, just protect themselves against unnecessary extra stress that they don't want to experience every day. And we have to earn the truth. We have to earn their discretionary effort. We have to give them evidence that they can speak up and they won't be embarrassed, they won't be punished, there won't be retribution, all of these other things. We can't just tell them, this is a safe space, you can tell me whatever you want, and then have them be consequences for what they tell us. The actions have to back up our words. So I love how you said that. I think that's awesome.
Well, and it is so very true. And, to your point, the value of being able to inspire people to dip into their discretionary effort zone, it shows up among small groups and teams. Like, the boss walks out on the shop floor and they go, "Hey, where's Sally? What's she doing?" And somebody else pipes up and says, "Oh, Sally got a call from the school. Her kid got sick. She had to leave, but I got with her. She told me what she's got going on. I've got it covered. I'm handling it." We felt like we didn't need to bother you with the issue. And I think for a well-established leader going in the right direction with their leadership values, that's a win. That's a win when you've got two employees covering each other and helping each other out. And I mean, covering in a good way.
Yes.
Not covering in a bad way, but that's discretionary effort, because the person that volunteered to cover, they've got their own load that they're responsible for. But they said, I feel for my colleague. She's going to go do that. I'm good with that. And that is that extra capacity that can be tapped into.
And we have to earn it. We have to draw it out of people. It is so easy to fall into the entitlement trap as a leader and feel like I'm entitled to somebody's activity. I write their paychecks. I pay their benefits. I give them a job. They need to do this for me. No, they don't. They don't. Unfortunately, for centuries, there have been plenty of people that have proven if I do just enough every day, I can keep getting paid and take care of my family. Nobody owes us any more than that. It's like calling a customer service professional. I'm the customer. You need to take care of me. No, they don't. They need to do just enough so if that call gets pulled and audited, they can say they follow company policy, whether they help you or not. So instead of feeling entitled to somebody's discretionary effort, to their extra focus, to their extra attention, we need to go out as leaders and find ways to earn it. And I believe one of the best ways to create that psychological safety is to help people save face and protect their self-image. If you can help them save face and protect their self-image, if you can find a way to help them tie what they're already doing towards the shift you want them to make. So it doesn't sound like you're asking them to change. It doesn't sound like you're asking them to start from scratch. You're asking them to build on the momentum that they already have. And some of the things that are talked about all the time, recognition, support, resources, all of those things along the way help. Even if you're trying to build that psychological safety, publicly call out the mistakes you've made and the lessons that you've learned the hard way. All of these things will help. And sometimes, and I'll pause after this, I don't want to run all over your show, I apologize, but how often do leaders ask, do you have any questions? With the sincere intent of, if you have a question, ask me. But we don't realize that if you see me as the leader, the person in charge, what have you, if I tell you what to do or how to do it, and then ask you if you have any questions, there's a real set of fears associated with asking a question. Am I going to think that you're stupid, incapable, inattentive, you don't care, you're disrespectful? So it's just safer for you to say, no, man, I got it. And then go make it worse before you actually ask any questions. Whereas if I was to say, sometimes I feel like things are really clear inside my head, but they're not always clear when I speak them. So I'm curious, how many questions did I just create? Now it's on me. And I've helped protect your self-image, and it's clearly safe for you to ask me a question based on how I brought it up. So some of these little shifts to how we operate every day can have a significant impact on what people choose to say and do for us.
Well, I think related to that, and I'm going to ask you the question, evaluate my thought on leadership here. One of the other things I encourage people to do when they're trying to communicate a next step or a vision and have that part of the dialogue going on, and they want to confirm the clarity what I encourage people to do is simply ask people to feed it back to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would you mind, now that we've had this discussion, and I know I did most of the talking, can you tell me what you heard?
Yeah.
And I mean, is that an okay approach, or does that fuel some of the anxiety? I don't know. I'm asking.
I think both. I think it's an okay approach. Clearly, it's been successful for you and it's been successful for others. And I've done similar things. So I'm never going to stand here and say, well, that wouldn't work. I mean, it has. But if I was, here I am, a bald man splitting hairs. But one of the things we want to be careful for is we don't accidentally come across as parental or patronizing. And not that we mean to, but could be perceived as that. One of the unfortunate things about communication is we were all taught to communicate as children by adults who talk to us as if we were children. So then we become adults and we have to communicate with other adults and we don't realize it, but we're communicating to them as if we're the adult and they're the child, because that's how we were always spoken to. So it's just what we know. And I don't really know of any adults who like being spoken to as a child. So you didn't do this at all in your example. One of the things I would want to avoid would come across as like the dad. Like, tell me what I just said to you. Prove to me that you look me in the eye. You know, I don't want to come, and you didn't, but I don't want to come across that way. So for me, I would look to be, in my preference, people do what works for them, right? I would want to be within a credible set of guardrails, a little bit self-effacing with how I set it up. So it could be something like, you know, I've been working through this for 10 years. So sometimes when I explain it, I have to realize that there could have been important pieces that I skipped over without realizing it. So I would be grateful if you could please walk me through, which is my favorite question to ask, by the way, please walk me through. I would appreciate it if you could please walk me through your perception of what the best next steps are from here. Or I'd appreciate it if you could please take me back to, another question I like to ask, if you could please take me back to a few areas that I didn't properly address. Or it could even be, you know, for me, oftentimes I'm stuck in this office working up opportunities or strategies, but I'm not the one out in the field actually dealing with things every day. So right now I need to stop and ask from the perspective of the person who is out in the field every day, what am I missing? How should we apply this differently? So it's essentially the same question. But for me personally, my bias, my one man's opinion, I like to try not to ask somebody directly to repeat back what I said or what they heard, because I don't want it to feel like a test. Were you just listening to me? Because in reality, I would assume most of the time, what you really care about is you go do what needs to be done the right way to get the best outcome. And whether you heard exactly what I said or not, that's what we need you to do. So I want to try to focus the confirmation question or set of the conversation around that, as opposed to coming across as, did you listen to me? So I don't know if I said that clearly enough. I do think it's a good approach. I just want to focus it around outcomes and help people save face.
You know, what I like about the feedback you gave me on that question is that I never thought about that parent-child paradigm that and now that I think about it, the way you described it, I agree 100%. That's exactly what the problem is. And any notion closely related to that, because the other element that I think is invoked here is something I talk about when I talk to leaders about communication. I describe the situation as a 4-part exercise. And it's not just a two-way deal when you're trying to communicate. First step is the thought you've conjured up or the message you formulate in your brain. And second step is getting it out there, whether it's spoken or written or otherwise. And how many times have we all said that didn't come out the way I was thinking about it? You know, so
Today,
you see that right away. But then the third step is the receiver taking it in, and there's a filter there that we may not have any control over. It might be experiential, it might be educational, and words also get lost in translation because of the filter. Classic example is the bilingual employee where English is not a primary language. We speak to them in our own butchered English, and we think they get it, and maybe every fourth or fifth word didn't really translate, so they've got a fuzzy idea of what you want them to do, and they go off and get to work, and you go check on it, and it's not. But the fourth piece, and this is where I think a lot of people, back to psychological safety, what they do filter in and receive can be packed with their own version of energy, positive or negative, based on the words you did use, and they might have their own trigger words associated with their experience. And it's literally like the leader saying the magic word that sets off an employee, and you didn't know it. You're the leader, you didn't know that was a thing. I use a simple example. When my wife and I first married, something had come up, I don't know if it was a neighbor or community thing going on, and I made the comment. I said, well, that person just acted kind of stupidly, or they were stupid about that. And she got real offended by that. I kind of went, whoa, what did I do? What did I do? And she said, we didn't ever use that word in my house growing up. We could not, it was not appropriate to call anything or anybody stupid. And so, okay, note to self, that's a trigger word. Don't confuse the conversation. I wasn't trying to be malicious or even really mean-spirited. I was just making my objective statement of the experience we had had. And this was just a conversation between us. It didn't involve the other person. I was just venting a little bit. But as a leader of my household, I made a note. I said, okay, let's not trip a conversation by the use of the word stupid. And I didn't attribute that same value to that word that she did. And so I think, bringing it back to the leadership situation, you don't know all of those words that are out there in the world that have become tripwires for your people. And I know that sounds like I'm telling people to become some kind of amateur psychologist to be able to be good at their job. I'm just saying, be aware. And usually if you step on that landmine when it's happening, you can tell there's a body language recoil, kind of reaction. So you got to stop right there and go, what just happened? I seem to have hit a nerve. I seem to have invoked something. Let me know what that is.
Yeah, you're spot on. We're never going to know what everybody's triggers are. But hopefully we can use a little bit of contextual awareness or common sense based on who we're talking to and the situation that we're in. That dreaded concept of self-awareness. And we could probably debate what percentage of leaders actually have a reasonable level of self-awareness and how many don't. But even when you talk about when you see their reaction, often when you see somebody's reaction, tie it to the trigger that immediately preceded it. So if I'm giving you a sentence, your reaction is almost certainly going to be on time to the specific word that sets you off. Now, if you're really working on trying to control your behavior, it might be delayed a little bit. But for most of us, when we're just in a regular conversation, as soon as I hear that word stupid, bam, I'm going to have that visceral reaction right then. So if we're being observant enough, I can tie the reaction to the word and know exactly what I said. And then depending on, we shouldn't be always apologizing. If an apology is appropriate, make it. If it's not appropriate, change the words, recognize that you said it, shift the conversation, whatever the right way to handle it is. But we should be able to tie it right there. I recently had a conversation with a woman, Therese Miklo, who teaches facilitation skills. And she said something that I really wish it was mine, but I got to make sure I give her credit for it. It was, leaders often prepare for what they want to say. But the great one, how'd you say it? Many leaders prepare for what they want to say. The great ones prepare for how it will land. And I feel like that's a spectacular quote that really speaks to what you're talking about. And I know we're probably getting close to the time, so I want to be respectful here. When you look at the 7 stages of potentially contentious conversations, people bring what they believe to be their relative life experience into our conversations. We might not know about it. We might not think it's relative. They do. Then they're going to react the strongest to what they observed first from the introduction on, based on the expectations that they brought in. As they start to listen, they're listening for, what's this conversation about? Where is it going? What does it have to do with me? Then as they start talking to themselves to answer this riddle, they're filtering everything they see and hear through their expectations. And that's what they're using to connect the dots and give meaning to themselves and how they think they should react. That's just the first half of the 7 stages. But if we're not aware of that, then we're ill prepared on how to address somebody to really think through what Therese said. How's it going to land? But then we can also misevaluate or misrepresent what their reactions seem to be based on our expectations as opposed to what they're currently experiencing. So yeah, I love what you just illustrated.
Yeah. Well, to put another layer on what you just said, I'm thinking just about speaking skills as a leader, being able to stand in front of a small group or a large group for that matter. There's a lot of work out there. There's a lot of communication coaches that talk about various frameworks, but one that I have in mind in particular is John Maxwell, the great leadership guru. He's written, 65 books or something like that. There's a part in his teaching where he actually breaks down schematically his keynotes. And he shows you there's a distinct pattern that he tries to achieve with all of his keynotes. And is sitting here off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember it exactly, but the point is there are elements he brings in. It's like, it's kind of like concept, data point, story. And then back to concept, data point, story. And it keeps this, it's kind of like a good piece of music. There's an ebb and a flow in it that gives you a hook and gets you connected to the message. And it's fantastic to understand and see some of that in the work he does. And he, of course, is a great speaker. And I mean, I've never either heard him online or been to one of his events where you can't tell everybody is drawn in when he's done.
Yeah. And having the plan for how your message is going to be communicated, for me, I'm not trying to get from John Maxwell to me. I just don't know a better way to say it. I apologize. But like for me, when I try to start with, what do I want everybody walking away thinking, feeling, and doing? So whether you're John Maxwell or the team leader at the local company on Main Street, if you're going to talk to your people, what do you want them walking away thinking, feeling, and doing? Then to your point about John Maxwell, how do I structure the conversation to do that? Not based on what I want to say, but based on what they need to experience to overcome their potential hesitance, resistance, negative expectations. Now, if I put that together, I should be in much better shape. And yes, there's a lot to be said in speaking for, clarity and lack of filler words and all, using narrative examples. All of those things are great. But I feel like for the average everyday leader, if we just focus much more on the clarity of the message framed around outcomes based on what we want people walking away thinking, feeling, doing, they'll forgive us of the ums and they'll forgive us of some of those other things because we're directly resonating with them based on where they are and the gap between that and where we're asking them to be. And we spend so much time worrying about, oh, shoot, I just said for the 5th time in the last minute. Now our stress levels rise. We're getting off track. Who cares? Focus on the importance of the message in order to empower people to feel like they're confident and prepared enough to get where they need to go.
Yeah, and to sum that up, if I may, you're speaking another key word that I stress leaders to think about it, and that is simply clarity. Yeah. I think job one for a leader is to be able to be crystal clear in their direction, call it vision, call it strategy, call it whatever you want to, but it's simply the message. If all you're talking about is the very next step, well, you got to be clear about that, because there is a premise that I fully believe in that reasonably good employees, and I know that's a big if, did you hire a reasonably good employee? Reasonably good employees want to do the right thing. And if you don't show them the right thing or talk about the right thing, they're going to do guess what? Not the wrong thing. They're just going to do nothing because doing something that's wrong is counterintuitive to them, counterproductive. It's the fear factor they don't want to go toward. So they're going to fundamentally figure out how to just float with the tide until they get their clarity so they can figure out how to do the right thing.
That's a great point. There's risk associated with doing the wrong thing. I could get in trouble. There could be consequences, whether it's I feel like a failure, whether I'm embarrassed, whether I have to take the time to do the work twice. Like, it's easy for them to justify doing nothing when they're not clear on the right thing to do. And for me, the most visceral example I have of this on maybe not daily, but at least a weekly basis is with my young son. There are so many times where I tell him what to do. I see him going to do something else. I'm like, Gabe. And he turns around and repeats back to me why he feels like he's doing exactly what I just told him to do. And I have to sit there and go, my fault. Let me re-explain. And for leaders, it kind of ties back to lowest common denominator theory. If there is a percentage of time where I'm asking different people to do different things and they are not executing what I asked them to, what are the odds that all of them in their own way are screwing this up versus me, being the lowest common denominator, have found a way to consistently lack clarity in how I deliver messages? So if people aren't executing what I want, I have to start with me. Am I being clear enough? Am I tying it into them well enough? Okay. If I can be reasonably confident that I am, now maybe I can start looking at the receiver of the message, but it's got to start with me and how I'm delivering it.
I love it. Well, Michael, excuse me, thank you so much. This has been just great stuff, and I really appreciate you opening the door on this idea. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. If they're interested in the book, they can go to disciplinelistening.com. That's where they can learn all there is about the book, sample some chapters, dive into the research behind it. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If they're looking to learn more about me, they can go to michaelreddington.com or connect with me on LinkedIn at Michael Reddington CFI. If they're looking to learn more about the programs that we teach to senior leaders, sales teams, negotiators, HR teams, they can go to inquasive.com, INQUASIVE.com. And certainly if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, they can email me, mreddington@inquasive.com. Just let me know that you heard me here on Doug's show, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got.
That's great. Great. Well, one last time, thank you so much for sitting in with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, folks, we're rapidly coming to the end of the show here. I do want to remind you we've got a video version of this over on YouTube, a channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, leave us a comment, give us thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever your flavor. And also, if you have a topic or a person you might want to recommend as a future guest on this show, I'd love to hear that from you. If you need to get a hold of me to do any work on your own leadership toolkit or maybe working with your leadership teams, please reach out to me at my website, Doug Thorpe, THORPE.com. And this show is sponsored by my company, Headway Exec. That's headwayexec.com. You can get some other information on that website as well. But for now, I think we've covered all the housekeeping and bill paying. So we're going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.